As a barrister, I must say that I'm quite amazed that this point of law has reached the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. Here's the question. Should a biological man have the same legal protection as a woman under the Equality Act 2010 if the person holds a gender recognition certificate that recognises their gender as female? That is the question before the court today and tomorrow, and the ramifications are a magnitude that I can't quite fathom, not just in the UK, but around the world, because the decisions of the UK Supreme Court are not insignificant around the world. And so I'm going to speak a little bit about that in this video. But before I go too much further, if I could ask you one small favour and subscribe to my channel down below. About 50 to 60% of the 8 million of you that watch every month don't do that, and I'd appreciate it if you did. I set up my channel to help you understand law. I am independent. I have no outside editorial control. Nobody owns me. Nobody controls what I say. No one tells me what I can and can't say. There'll be a few stories about that to come in the coming weeks, but I'd be really grateful if you subscribe to the channel. Now, I do have to caveat at the beginning of this video that this video is not intended to upset anybody. It's certainly not to ridicule anybody. And ultimately, this is just an open legal discussion in a democratic society. And so let's get into this case here. So just so there's no ambiguity as to what the facts and what the issue is before the court, I will put it on screen here. You can screenshot it, pause it, read it, but I will go through it with you now. I'll start with the facts because that's the best place to start. But in this appeal to the Supreme Court, this is challenging statutory guidance, which was issued by the Scottish ministers. So this appeal is brought by For Women Scotland. You've probably heard this around in the media today in the last few weeks. So they challenge the lawfulness of this statutory guidance by the Scottish ministers, which has the effect, and I will explain this, but it has the effect that a gender recognition certificate recognises that a person's gender is female, brings them within the Equality Act 2010 definition of a woman. And so just to spell this out, the statutory guidance as it currently stands means that a trans woman, that is to say a natal man with a GRC recognising gender as a woman, is defined as a woman within the Equality Act and has all of the legal protections against discrimination just as another woman would. This goes on. The Gender Representation and Public Boards Scotland Act 2018 is an act of Scottish Parliament which sets targets for increasing the proportion of women on public boards. The original Act definition of woman included people such as the following: those with the protected characteristic of gender reassignment, those living as a woman, and those proposing to undergoing, or have undergone gender reassignment process. So, in other words, natal men who either have the protected characteristic of gender reassignment, generally under the Act, living as a woman, and proposing to undergoing, or have undergone a gender reassignment process. In a legal challenge brought by For Women Scotland in the first case, FWS 1, the Court of Session found that the statutory definition was unlawful. So that definition I've just explained, that found was unlawful, as it dealt with matters that fell outside of the legislative competence of the Scottish Parliament. In other words, it was a matter for the supreme lawmaking body of this country, the Westminster Parliament. Following that case, the respondent issued new statutory guidance. So the Scottish ministers issued new statutory guidance. This is the guidance currently under challenge. This new statutory guidance states that under the Act, the definition of woman was the same as under the Equality Act 2010. It also stated that a person with a GRC recognising that their gender is female has the sex of a woman. So just to spell this out, what this new guidance says is that a natal man with a GRC is a woman under the Equality Act 2010. And that was challenged and rejected and now is appealed to this Supreme Court. So very much the case in question is going to determine what is a woman in law and can a man become a woman in law. Now this has all sorts of different problems and consequences and ramifications that will be felt around the world, not just in the UK, because the UK Supreme Court decisions are not insignificant in their effect around the world. Many other jurisdictions do lean on our case law decisions in how they apply their law, how they draft their law, and so on. And just as I go into some examples in just a moment, I want you to bear in mind that if somebody receives information about a GRC, an individual's GRC, it would be an offence to disclose that information to anybody else, either without their consent or without doing so to prevent crime and so on. So let's take, by way of example, women's refuges and shelters. They are quite literally set up as women-only spaces to protect women and girls who are survivors of certain types of abuse. They are set up to provide a women-only space for security, privacy, dignity, and to protect them. But in the scenario where a trans woman, that is to say, a natal man with a GRC, wants to enter that space, if the law says that they are a woman under the Equality Act, not only would they be entitled to enter that space, but it would be unlawful discrimination to refuse them entry to that space. But the people running the shelters would be committing an offence if they told anyone else within the shelter that this person had a GRC and was biologically male. Now let's look at hospitals, and in particular women-only wards, such as maternity wards, where women give birth. This law would mean that a trans woman, that is a natal man with a GRC, would have legal access to the women-only wards. But the other way round would also be true. A trans man, that is a natal woman with a GRC recognising that they are now a man, would not legally be allowed on that ward because it's a women-only ward for giving birth. That, quite frankly, is an absurdity because it would mean that a trans man, that is a natal woman who has a GRC to be legally recognised as a man, would be excluded from the women's ward. Now, there are all sorts of questions and all sorts of mental gymnastics over the legal definitions and the potential discrimination, whether that be discrimination by appearance, by presentation, or by sex, or by gender, all sorts of things. And these are the arguments, quite seriously, that have been happening in the UK Supreme Court today. I've listened to several hours, in fact, of these arguments throughout today. And these are some of the examples that are being discussed here. Now, my video here is not to replace any understanding of what's happened in the Supreme Court today. It is live. I don't know if they are going to publish the full hearing. Perhaps they will. They sometimes do. But my video is not to replace that. My video is general commentary on the types of issues that have been brought up. The issue of prisons has been brought up. Quite obviously, prisons are segregated male and female for obvious reasons. But a trans woman who is a natal man with a GRC, if this was the law, would be legally required to attend a women's prison. We've talked previously about sports competitions. Now, the Gender Recognition Act does, and hopefully should continue, to provide exclusions for fairness and safety of competitors. But if, again, this is a legal difficulty. If this statutory guidance by the Scottish ministers were upheld, that would mean a trans person with a GRC would have the acquired sex per the Equality Act, and thus would create, essentially, unlawful discrimination if they were restricted from participating in a sporting event of their acquired sex, even though there are lots of arguments against that because of the fairness and the safety of competitors. And this has obviously hit the media a lot in the last few weeks and months. And then all sorts of other arguments will come into play, such as changing rooms, bathrooms, shower rooms, searches on women by trans women who are, again, natal men with a GRC searching a woman. To many people, respectfully, that may sound perverse and absurd. But if the court upholds this as the law, then that is the reality that women around this country, and perhaps further afield, will face. And so, as I said at the outset, I can't quite believe that this question has reached the Supreme Court of the UK. I know that hints at an opinion, but I am independent. I am entitled to express my opinions to you. I don't often do that. I try not to. I try to give both arguments. And of course, in this scenario, the opposing argument is a person who experiences genuine gender dysphoria may feel discrimination if they are discriminated against because of their gender identity, gender recognition, and so on. All of that is perfectly sound and logical and fair, until, of course, it conflicts with rights of others, and that is where the real argument comes in. So again, to reiterate, this video is not to upset anybody, ridicule anybody, or anything of the sort. It is very much a lively debate and very much a real issue that will affect everybody, really, in this country and much further afield. If you do appreciate my videos and my input, please do subscribe, as I say, like the video, hit the notification bell, and as always, thank you for watching.